Are you living in your circle of influence or your circle of concern? In today's video, we look at a powerful lesson in personal change that can lead to better mental health and less stress. So, let's get into it.
This is the business of art.
G'day, Paul here with the Business of Art, where creativity and commerce come together. You know, running a business can be stressful. Being an artist can be stressful. Just living life can be pretty stressful. And there is so much that is just bombarding us all the time, telling us that we should be worried about climate change, threat of war, interest rates. For us as an artist, it might just be, when am I going to get another gig, or when am I going to get paid? It can all be a bit too much, and for some, it will lead to a life of fear, worry, and stress that can be really hard to shake. I used to get pretty stressed about almost everything, and it was really hard to move out of that as a default setting. But I was always interested in self-development and growing my self-awareness, and that pursuit led me to find Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book absolutely changed my life, and if you've never read it, I really want to encourage you to go out and get a copy and start immersing yourself in the concepts that he talks about in this book. Now, although I've tried to adopt all 7 of these principles, there are a few key things at the very beginning that really stood out to me, and they were the first things that I started with. And one of those is what I want to talk about today: the circle of influence and the circle of concern. Now, I don't want you to think that this was an overnight success. It took time and effort and focus, but these concepts helped me see things from a different perspective that led me to create a little system for myself that really helped me to look at things differently and be able to approach life in a different way. And the end result of that was being able to reduce a lot of stress in my day-to-day life. First, I want to give you a very simple breakdown of the concept. Nothing as detailed as the book, but hopefully it will give you a sense of where to start. And then I'll tell you how it led me to be able to reshape my thinking and make a change in my own life. Okay, so the concept starts with you. So imagine that you are in the center and around you is a circle. That first circle is your circle of influence. Within that circle is everything that you can personally affect, influence, and change. And I want you to think for a minute, what are those things? When you really think about the things that you can personally affect and impact and change, what are they? Now, outside of all of that is a bigger circle. That's your circle of concern. That is everything that you might think could happen, that you worry about, that you stress about. You know, what will someone think of me if I do this? Or what will they say if this? Or wouldn't it be nice if whatever? That's everything that lives in the circle of concern. Now, ultimately, when you think about everything that you can influence, it really comes back to you. Your decisions, your choices, what you say, what you react and respond to, and the way that you react and respond to things. You can't really change anybody else. You can try, you can offer advice, you can show them a path, but ultimately that choice is theirs to make and lies within their own personal circle of influence. Now, you might have authority over someone, like a parent or a boss, and you might be able to command somebody to do something, and because of that authority relationship, they will do that. But don't get confused that that is true influence, because outside of that authority relationship, would that person actually do what it is that you want them to do? As tough as it is to hear, the reality is that most things that happen to us impact us from outside in our circle of concern, things that we have no control of. Government decisions, someone cutting you off in traffic, relationship breakdowns, all of those sorts of things. You can't control the stimulus, but what you can control is that moment between the stimulus and the response. You can choose to react emotionally in that moment, or you can stop and make a choice to respond differently. There's actually a very powerful story in the book, and I'm going to read it just very briefly because, to paraphrase, it would not do it justice. It's about a man named Viktor Frankl who was a POW to the Nazis in the war. And this is what it says. One day, naked and alone in a small room, Frankl began to become aware of what he later called the last of the human freedoms. The freedom his Nazi captors could not take away. They could control his entire environment. They could do what they wanted to his body, but Viktor Frankl himself was a self-aware being who could look on as an observer at his very involvement. His basic identity was intact. He could decide within himself how all of this was going to affect him. Between what happened to him, or the stimulus, and his response to it, was his freedom or power to choose that response. Now, the book goes on to explain that Frankl would put himself mentally into a different place and essentially use his imagination to be able to take him out of the situation that he was in so that it would not break his spirit. And Frankl went on to be an inspiration to other prisoners and to some of the guards as well. That's a pretty strong example, but we can equate that sort of thing to our own lives. There are things that affect us that we can't control, and between that stimulus and the response is our ability to choose how we respond. A lot of people who live in their circle of concern respond emotionally off the cuff without thinking, and they are angry and frustrated, and it affects them. They become reactionary rather than living in their circle of influence, which means that they become proactive. They take that moment, they have that beat where they stop and decide how they're going to respond. So the way that this affected me was that I became aware that all of these things were causing me stress in my life, and I didn't want them to. And I had to decide how I was going to respond to those things. Looking at what are the things that were stressing me out and what were the things that were concerning me that I could ultimately have no control over. And one of the first steps that I took was cutting out some of those things that I could choose to not interact with. I stopped watching the news, I stopped reading newspapers, because ultimately I felt for me it was just a bad addiction. I was becoming addicted to the negativity, and that was affecting my stress. And to this day, I don't watch the news. I get updates from my wife, other people's feeds on social media. It's made a massive difference to the way that I engage with the world. The other thing that I started to do was to look at things that were stressing me out and asking why. Why was this stressing me out? Why was I becoming stressed about this thing? And what I found was that more often than not, I had taken action and I was worried about the outcome. And when I actually looked at it, I realized that there was nothing more I could do until somebody else responded or some other action was taken that was actually beyond my control. And when I started to see how often that happened, I realized all I could do was focus on my circle of influence, the things that I could do and change and decide, and leave it at that. Once I had done everything that I could, the ball was now in somebody else's court. That was in their circle of influence now to actually take action. And if they didn't take action, there was nothing more I could do. And this was so prevalent in so many of the interactions and communication around the types of work that I was doing. Now, I still get it wrong. I'm not perfect. I still stress out about things, but having this simple process that has really worked for me allows me the opportunity to really look at what is stressing me out and why. Work out whether it's something that's still within my circle of influence. Can I actually do anything more about this? And work out either yes, I can and take action, or no, I can't, and leave it in somebody else's court to deal with. It's by no means a perfect framework. It's not something that happens quickly. It took me a long time to be able to make that a habit. You know, we're talking about changing habits, and that is the hardest thing that anyone can ever do. But by just having a simple process for myself that worked for me, I was able to get through those stressful times much faster and more regularly, to the point where the table has turned and I am so far less stressed about everything day to day than I ever was before. If this is something that you're interested in digging into further, I cannot encourage you enough to go out and get a copy of Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and start digging into this for yourself to make that personal change. That's it. I hope you found some benefit for yourself in that. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. And of course, if you found any value in this, there is probably a good chance that you know somebody else who would also find some value in it. So please tag them in the comments, share it with them, whatever you've got to do to pay it forward so we can keep helping each other out. Thanks very much. I'll see you next time.